wait for the slides to load up. And I see a full house. Thank you for everyone joining in. So I know there are a lot of words here, and while I do that, I'll try to get a handle on this thing. But yeah, so I know there are a lot of words here, but the intent is not to confuse you. Intent is to introduce you to where things are. We are kind of going to take a flow which is more in terms of you getting into a flight and cruising on and then landing in. And the very simple reason, because there are certain things which you might find boring because you might already know it. A lot of people will be traveling on the flight for the first time. So you might as well listen to the instructions in terms of what is what. You'll get to understand the vocabulary. You'll get to know how they play with each other. You get to see what can you solve with it and how do you build it and where we can actually help with it. So yeah, let's get on to this journey.
Sorry, there's a request to speak a
Oh,
little
sure, thank you. I should have checked on that first. Well, I'm sure you would have heard of NFT, all the places, and what exactly is NFT? Now it's a very simple thing. Every one of you have graduated. You would have a certificate. On your degree certificate, there might be some number at the bottom which you might not even think about why it is there. But then when you are probably going for some further studies, that number kind of becomes more important because that is your proof of authenticity. That's what you use to verify. But now that's a physical thing. Now a physical thing has a proof of authenticity, then what would be the case for digital? So that's where basically, well, COVID times, a lot of engineers had good time to sleep and think and figure out something more. So they came up with something called as an NFT. I'm not saying it happened during the COVID times, but as a concept, it's essentially the engineers basically trying to figure out how do you basically give a proof of ownership. So just right at the bottom, I know it's not quite visible, but what you're trying to show here is a couple of tools which basically speak about what would define the next internet. So you are already using the internet. You are having your mobile apps, you are having your PCs, you are seeing Netflix, you are seeing Hotstar, all of it is there. But then what next? What would happen next? So if you have already reached this far, what would be the next step? So essentially what we are trying to do as part of this entire exercise, and we meaning all the programmers, the engineers, the solution architects, and everyone out in the technical field, not just AWS, but anyone else who's out there, is coming up with answers to these different problems and trying to define how would the next phase of internet look like. So NFT, a simple concept where we are basically saying it's a proof of ownership or a language of ownership. And what it does is basically more of contract. And that hence the word which I use in terms of language. So it's a contract which basically says what you have digitally is something which I can prove that you own it. Now when we just speak in that words, you need to look at it in simple things. When you look at your certificate, who's validating it? Probably the university. In case of the language of ownership or the NFT here, or the non-fungible token as we call it, who is validating it? It's a chain network in this case. Some of the words would be new to you, we'll be introducing it along the way. But the chain network is essentially the one which is basically validating the authenticity, or sorry, the ownership of this document. But that said, who has the certificate? I'll go back to the certificate example. You own the physical certificate, but the university is validating it and making sure you are the actual owner of it. In that sense, your actual asset does not stay on the blockchain. It may be physical, it may be outside of the blockchain, or that's what we call as an off-chain asset. So if you look at the words out here, you will basically say it's an on-chain token, more of an university kind of a representation where we basically, we as in the blockchain basically calls out saying we can verify the ownership of your asset, which probably can be physical or virtual. To give you an example, you might have a small brochure which is right there on your table. Can I make an NFT out of it? Yes, you can. Essentially, you need to have a representation in which is proving that you own it. The second word, Metaverse. I know this has been spoken about. Everybody wants to be part of it. Facebook just rebranded itself to call itself Meta. Well, the question here is essentially how do you consume your internet? So if I ask these questions across the audience out here, just a quick show of hands. How many of you use mobiles? Almost everyone? How many of you use your laptops? Almost everyone. But then what next? What next? Like what is the next way of consuming your internet? You've been using it for so many months, ages, years, but then nobody is basically asking the question, what is the next form of consumption? Yes. Thank you for calling that out. That helps. So yeah. So essentially what we are saying is this is the next set, and hence the word evolutionary more than a revolutionary one. So basically, everyone who's building this phase is saying, okay, look, we've kind of achieved what we should have over a period of time. What's the next step? Now, is it the case that these don't exist? You have graphic cards right now, you have games which give you high fidelity, but essentially what we're calling out is what would be the next step of giving an immersive virtual experience? Is it well defined yet? No, it's in our creative hands. We have to basically continue to dig for it, look at the different experiences which we can build, and that is essentially what the word metaverse is. So while I go through these words, you might see that there's a definition which is written on the top. Of course, everyone can read it. But the reason why I'm not just calling it as a definition is because, sorry for that, is because it's not yet fully defined. It's evolving as more and more technology comes into play. It's evolving as and when new things are being built. And when you look at the metaverse side of things, there are four, well, of course, there are 7 layers, but there are 4 key elements which is currently defining that experience. One is the user hardware. It can be what, your AR glasses. It can be, the second is the world which is come up on the edge, just about when 5G gets introduced, and edge computing. The third is a decentralized world state, and the fourth is a centralized world. Now, all 4 of these would play a different role at different point in time, and they are slowly and steadily contributing and helping towards building those 7 layers. So essentially, this is an evolutionary change, and just to keep in mind, this is going to be the new face of the internet, along with one of the phase. So it's not that when mobiles came to be, laptops just died away, or when laptops came to be, the PCs just died away. It's just going to be a newer experience which is going to be there. So that's why I say call it as an internet visual experience. The third one, which is Web3, and Utkarsh just spoken long about it. You need to understand, when we talk about Web3, again, we try to classify it, put it into a bucket, figure out what exactly would be Web3, and you find all of them trying to say itself as Web3. But let me just take one step back. If I ask this question, what's the current backbone of your internet, or how do your apps work? Your immediate answer is there's some server somewhere, probably on a cloud, and it automatically gives you the things. But then, is that backbone enough? Is there a better way of creating that backbone? And the only definition which basically calls out in any document, any article, anything which you look up, you'll find that it doesn't say is that Web3 is this. It says that Web3 should be built on the backbone of blockchain. So it is basically saying that one of the backbone has to be blockchain. It has to inherit the features which a blockchain can bring to play. And there are multiple different features which basically a blockchain can bring into play. And essentially, what we're talking about is 3 different philosophies. A centralized compute, which is where we started from, a distributed compute, which we are currently in, and a decentralized compute, which we are working towards, and which is the blockchain side. The next one, decentralized finance. And I'm sorry, I'm coming towards the end of it. I'm not having too many words after this. But the decentralized finance, now here's the thing. When you talk about a traditional finance, you would have centralized players who is responsible for handling your money. But here's the interesting question. Does anyone have any doubt that the money which you own in your wallets right now is not yours? Anyone who has a doubt that that money is not yours, you have a 5 rupee coin, it's not yours, so you don't have a doubt about it. So I see no hands raised. That essentially means, well, you own that money, but then when you kind of look at the central players around, like there was this conversation about, I don't know whether to put it across, but there was this conversation or thread where UPI is going to have an extra charge. Well, whether it be or not be, irrespective, how do you have a banking setup, a financial setup, a fintech setup, a financial instrument without having intermediaries who would be participating and basically controlling all of this process? Now, essentially, there is a slight change in this with respect to the previous terminologies. The core change here is that this setup is not going to be owned by any state. When I say a state, being a state as in a country, it's something which will be open for everyone to consume, open for everyone to participate. That more or less gives you a glimpse in terms of what are those keywords which I spoke about. But I'll just kind of circle back just to give you a perspective in terms of why those keywords. Decentralized finance, the new language of currency for the internet. When you call about Web3, for the next generation internet, that would become one of the backbones. And I'm not saying that's the only backbone. There can be a new invention which comes along, which can become one more backbone to it, which essentially means it's not that it's going to have multiple backbone, but it's going to be one of those bones within that spinal cord which is going to support that entire ecosystem. Metaverse, the new visual experience which is going to be used for the consumption model. And NFT, which is essentially the language of ownership for everything which is going to be there on this new version of this internet or on this new generation of this internet. So yeah, that takes us through all of the key words. But then, why one more word actually? I just said I finished all of the words, but then here's the interesting thing. And a lot of the times we basically realize the mobile games and the games which are there are basically for kids or for people who are nerds or probably gamers for that matter. But then the question is, or the interesting insight is, gaming is that one area technologically where it is very experimental. It has been at the forefront of taking everything and putting it inside and bringing something out. So essentially, gaming is that next-gen alpha version of the next version of internet. So what we mean by that is essentially it has taken the NFT, it has taken the decentralized finance, it has taken the play-to-earn model, and of course the game, and combined it, and that's a word which has come out. So when you hear GameFi, it's essentially these things. But then you notice that metaverse is not here. So does that mean that GameFi would not have metaverse? Not exactly. This is an evolving definition. So essentially what I'm trying to say is, it's basically trying to combine all of it and is doing an alpha run and a beta run on the next version of the internet. So when you see any GameFi game, just go and try it out. Well, it's not a recommendation, it's my personal opinion. But jokes apart, just go ahead and try it out and see how it plays out in terms of this new technology. Now, that brings us to the next part of this entire discussion, which is the cruising part. Well, all the words, what do these words mean and how do they play with each other? Well, if you look at it, I've kind of put 4 axes in this entire setup, and I'm sorry that the bottom is not readable, but I'll read it out for you. On the left-hand side, you have domains. On the top, you have tech. On the right, you have solutions, and the bottom, you have philosophy. Now, why did I call it out as philosophy? Because whenever anything is brought up or anything is built, you would be trying to solve a problem. And you ask any startup founder, you ask anyone who's building something, they would say, this is my principle, this is why I want to solve this problem. And there are principles around the internet which are not working right now, philosophies around the internet which are not working around right now. There are domains which are already existing. There is technology which we've been building over the years. So for instance, things about consensus, permission network, well, DLT stands for Distributed Ledger Technologies, which is blockchain. And blockchain is not the only one, interestingly. So if you have been hearing blockchain, that's not the only DLT or ledger technology which is there. There is directed acyclic graphs. There are multiple different answers. So technology has basically run ahead and found out different ways to tackle left and right, which is left and the bottom. And all of this is basically driving towards solutions which is to your right. Decentralized apps, decentralized autonomous organization, metaverse, Web3. Essentially, what it is trying to do is pick up, let's say for example, we are picking up a metaverse in this case. It's taking a game engine, it's trying to basically ensure it as part of the NFT, it's taking the ownership so that if there's a land on metaverse, you kind of know you own it. And these 4 elements are being combined into concepts which we are calling as DeFi and GameFi. Now, when you look at anything in this space, when the easiest way is to first think, okay, this is under buzzword. But then when you look at it in a different perspective or a different prism, you'll notice that these buzzwords are not actually all the same meaning. Some of them focus on technologies, some of them focuses on solutions built on those technologies, some of them focuses on a concept which is built using the domain, the tech, the solution, and the philosophy behind it. So if you look at something which is around DeFi, it is taking the Web3, it's taking the NFT, it's taking the smart contract, it's taking the fintech, and it's taking the transparency on auditability and the decentralized aspect of it. It's combining all of that. So when you hear a new buzzword coming around in this space, and which you'll very well often hear a lot more going forward because of the kind of pace at which all of us are innovating, look at this as in terms of these four lenses, and that answer becomes much more clearer to you. So what is the tech behind it? Is it a solution? What's the philosophy which is driving it? And what's the domain which it's operating on? Now, why this mind map? Essentially to give you a prism in terms of what are the different buzzwords and how can you actually break it apart. And when you look at all of these, you have other places also where these technologies being used: embedded finance, connected factory, experiential retail, which is more towards the metaverse side, connected vehicles. Well, you've been hearing these words, but then are they actually using these technologies? Yes, they are trying to get into a point where they can start using blockchain. So they are trying to get into a point where they may try to experiment with metaverse. So elements of these are being brought in different flavors. Not all of it is in the early stages, which basically would mean that the folks sitting here have the first try to go and be the experimenters, the innovators, to combine them. So you come up with a new permutation with this, you might probably be the first one in the world to get going with it. So you practically have the full handle on terms of this new evolution which is happening. Which takes us to the next one. What are we solving? Well, simple and straightforward. We go back to here, take a domain problem. Look at the tech which is required. There are enough number of techs, but essentially it starts with the domain problem, which is why it's the first thing which is put across the left. There's no point in taking anything which is there as a technology and then not solving a problem. So you get started with the domain problem. I know I flipped it a couple of times, but it's to emphasize that the domain is important. Once you take the domain, then you take the tech and the principles. If you know the techs and the principles with which you're going to run, you have the solutions which are already there, or you might as well build something which becomes a new solution. So if you look at it in that sense, if you are solving, if you know what you have to solve, and if you know what is there as an option for you to solve, then the question is, how do I build it? I call it my Maggie recipe just because it's a quick one for me to break things apart. It's just a reference, but that's not the only recipe. Now, interesting part, if you look, all the three words are there. So we are basically telling that from a solutioning standpoint, one thing is not just the answer. You can mix it the way you would want. If you are looking at a centralized component, some of them may be visual, some of them might be the off-chain data contents. You might have chain analytics, which is to be done, basically analytics on the content which is there on the blockchain, which you may not be able to run on the blockchain now. Oracles is something which, in terms of when you already call something as a decentralized setup, you need somebody who's, let's say, for instance, connecting to the credit bureau and getting the data. So you might need APIs which basically pull those data out. From the distributed side, you have compute, security, storage, which is available on the cloud. On the decentralized side, you have blockchain, smart contracts, and DApps. These were things which Utkarsh covered, so I'm not getting to the specifics of it. That brings us to the last part, which is the most interesting part. Well, I'll go back 1 second to show you three parts, which is used to solve, which is the actual implementation for solving it. But when you actually get into the nitty-gritty, sorry, let me get back to here. When you get into the nitty-gritty of implementing this, you need services or you need technology answers which can actually solve for each one of these areas. And that's where we actually land into. So this is not the entire scope of it. There are more. You may find out new flavors and you might need more things. But this is something which you can actually look at for getting started. And I'll take it from the rightmost because a lot of them would want to kind of try out with the blockchain side of things. On the rightmost, you'll have two services, and specifically to manage blockchain and elastic compute. Why those two? Because the blockchain is in a setup where you are more focused on compute and storage, which essentially means you need different types of nodes, different type of CPU combinations. And what's interesting here is a lot of you would be very familiar with Mac M1 chips, a new version of Mac which has M1. You're already using a mobile, and you're already using something inside it, something which is called as ARM64, and you might be hearing 64-bit, 64-bit, 64-bit. But then what we have as an EC2 offering is basically Graviton, which is ARM64, AMD, which is an AMD 64 and the 64-bit one, and Intel. All three available as three different offerings, which essentially gives you the full flexibility of running it, running your node, running your blockchain on an hardware of your choice. That, just moving to the left, you need something which is distributed. Why do you need something which is distributed? Take an example of a metaverse and consider that this is the metaverse event which is running. And you all are going to log in virtually. Ever tried booking an Tatkal ticket just before the window just opens? You'll find that it's not as responsive as much as you would want it to be. That essentially calls for something which can scale up, which is distributed, something which can actually work to that scale. And that's where you have those 4 services. And on to the leftmost, something which is currently centralized, which is more on the analytics side. Because you need those data coming in, you need the data crunching which has to happen, and all of that will be driven by the centralized setup. Well, all talk, but then what does that mean? Has it been done? Has it been implemented? Are there places where customers are using it? Are there solutions where it's been tried and tested? The answer to it is these are solution references which we've been talking to about with our customers. These are solutions. This is an example solution for an NFT app. Essentially, if you were to kind of have a service which basically connects to any of the chain networks, you can replace that Ethereum with any of the existing chain network. But in this case, because it's managed blockchain, it's only Ethereum and Hyperledger. But you do have other ways to basically plug it in. That's one solution for an NFT app. This is interesting. Now, a lot of times you would be hearing about crypto wallets, but then let's take an example of and large-scale crypto wallet. And what I mean by that is, instead of all of you using UPI right now, or GPay or Paytm or whatever your preferred choice, let's say this entire audience sitting here gets into a crypto wallet. Is crypto wallet ready enough to support it? Now, where did we have this drive to come up with the solution? We looked at gaming, and we found that there are a lot of games which is wanting to hit a large scale. And what are the problems which will come if a game is going to basically come? Like, let's say PUBG introduces, and this is just an example for reference purpose. Let's say PUBG introduces an wallet-based, crypto wallet-based setup. What would it need to actually scale up to that point? How do you manage the security? How do you give that level of confidence to your end players? And it's not going to be Bitcoin savvy or a crypto savvy player. It can be anyone for that matter. So how do you ensure that you have a solution which can actually work and solve those problems? That's where this looks like. This one, interestingly, is what we've actually experimented with, and we put it out there. So there's a game by the name The New World. It's an Amazon game by Amazon Game Studios. Essentially, it's an MMORPG game, massively multiplayer online role-playing game. This is the design which basically supported that scale of a game launch, where on day one, you had hundreds and thousands of players joining in. That's very similar to a metaverse kind of a scale to start with. And this is a design which worked for that. So we are basically calling out that, look, it's not something which are just talking in terms of each of this phase. We're basically solving these problems. We are making sure that you have solutions which can help you out. These are things which you're working with folks to get you across the border in terms of the solutions which you build. So that brings us to the last and most important part. Different words, but then think about it from the mind map standpoint. There are 4 elements: the domain, the technology, the solution, and the principles. And you have services and solutions which we have to offer in terms of how you can build it. Now, the interesting thing is we can't tell you what to build. That's because that's your creative aspect. But we definitely have the Lego blocks or the blocks, building blocks to actually get it done. So that brings to the end, and happy to take questions. Sure, please.
I'm having a question for DeFi.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Second, can I get the mic to you?
So I'm having a question in DeFi sector of this particular. If a decentralized finance is a thing,
Yes.
if every individual created their own DeFi coin,
Yes.
for example, and what is there for the governments or the governments? What will be a common factor for all those DeFi thing to manage this common factor? Should be there or not?
I'll kind of take this question a slightly different way to make sure I get a technical answer across, and slightly a conceptual one at the same time. If you look at it, currently games already have coins. So is it a currency? It's a currency within the game. So yeah, coming to that. So I'll just finish that part and I'll come to your exact point which you're asking. So technically, there are enough number of currencies which are there. There are enough number of nodes and different ways of mechanism of trading. So look at this as a financial instrument. The financial instrument can work in a market only if there are buyers and sellers. So essentially, no, this is a one form of the financial instrument. So before shares came to be, or trades came, in terms of forex came to be, the first person who would come up with possibly having saying this is something new, it may not work. Look at it from the lens in terms of a technological standpoint. Like you can take it the same for NFT as well. NFT is basically also proving an ownership. It's not validating the authenticity of it. So that does not, in the same thing in the real setup as well. There are fakes. You will have a Nike shoes, you'll have a Nike fake probably. So these are technological solutions without, to put it in better word, a simpler word, without any external political governance or any other influence. These are pure technology. How you create with it, how do you work within the ecosystem, and will the ecosystem come up with policies, compliance? Yes, every sector comes up with it. So that is not something which we can control at a technology side. From a technological standpoint, purely, it's a solution which can solve that. Now, whether you use DeFi to have a financial currency or you have multiple currencies, how that would fare, we can't say that. I can just speak on the technology side. I know I have not answered your question, but I am trying to make sure I put across the point in terms of the lens, in terms of separation. So look at it technology versus implementation.
If two startups wants to collaborate or work together, there must be something, a tangible thing where what we value a thing like a currency. It is a value of something where two companies or two entities trade or do anything, whether me or you. So for us, say if two individuals want to work together and they both are somehow way we can say are collaborating in a way. So how can we, they are already having their own individual coins. So how can a compliance management system can work up or something through tech perspective only? How can a compliance management system should be there or not? Is this a right time to also put up the mind in this direction also?
Yeah, so people have already put up their mind in that direction, which is the decentralized exchange and the borrowing and lending protocol. DeFi is one of this technology area which has been fairly explored in, and to the point that there's DeFi 2.0. It's just evolved from 1.0 to 2.0, and there's a new version of it which is coming. So I can take that question individually and kind of elaborate it, but at a high level, there are contracts.
I can make it easier, like Bitcoin. Some governments are making it legal, but some are not making it
legal. Let me park you there.
Ah.
I understand you have more follow-up questions, but I also want to take questions from the rest of the folks as well. We can catch up on that, and we can have a long debate if you if it helps. Sorry, yes.
Do you think in coming future smart contracts will change property transaction scenario happening in India?
I can't answer that. I can only give you a technological answer. The reason for that is very simple. I can tell you how smart contract works, and I'll just go back to the very first slide. I'm a solution architect.
Okay.
I can come up with technical answers.
Okay.
So what I essentially do for customers across India and specifically startups, and I also come in a specialization of gaming, is essentially you think of a problem, we think of an answer and give you. So I can't answer it in terms of how it will evolve, but then I can also tell you this, that people are creatively coming up with different answers, permutations, combinations. Every conversation is an exciting one for us because we are getting to hear a new story, a new thought process, a new creative ask, and a new challenge actually. So these answers didn't come automatically. We were challenged. We were put across to come up with a new answer. These are answers which you have to come up with. And these are answers, and you would have probably heard it again and again, and well, just if you're not, it's our philosophy to be customer obsessed. So we listen, you come up with a new problem. Even if it's your only problem, we'll come up with an answer for you.
Hi, this
Hi.
is Naren.
Hi, Naren.
So I don't know whether it's this question will be for you or
We
Utkarsh.
can both take it
Yeah.
up, that's all right.
So outside finance,
Yes.
looking at health tech.
Yes.
So there are like specifically provider, payer, and patient, right?
Yes.
So it's like finance.
Yes.
The security and like sharing of data. There are certain aspects
Correct.
wherein blockchain philosophically can address it very well.
That's correct.
On other hand, it's not, adoption is slower as
So
compared
you
to.
have three versions of the blockchain. Well, not blockchain. Let me kind of put it slightly more on the philosophical side. We call it permissioned, public, and private. You also have a fourth one which is called federated. So what we are talking about in a connected vehicle, connected factory, or any new domains, they may have a scenario which basically says we don't want to have it public,
Right.
and you might want to obfuscate something. So which is the PII related data sets. So depending on the use case, while this is an answer, it is not the only answer. What I'm showing here is only a limited set. Like technologically, the one on the top, I know I put dots over there, but it probably go for 3-4 pages more.
Right.
What has happened is essentially, we are at a interesting time in technology where a lot of the answers have landed, and it's just a time for people to combine them. So, and I would love to hear through if you have any other use cases. Utkarsh and I can definitely chat on it, and we do have a specialist who works specifically for healthcare sectors. So if you have a problem which you're trying to tackle around this space,
Right.
we can definitely help you out.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I think it's a generic question.
Sure, please.
Can you just give us some case study or some example where you've taken maybe a client who was already hosted on AWS and what were the steps? How long did it take? What are the I'm sure every project is different, but a little bit idea into how it went through. And you actually delivered the solution using AWS cloud.
There are two parts to this question. One part I would love to have a one-to-one chat because there is a lot of specifics inside it.
Yeah.
The part which I can talk generic to across everyone in the audience is this is a solution which is deployed right now, available for you to play as part of the New World game, which is the Metaverse one. So it's not someone even if a third party. Like when here's the philosophy. Like when you give something, you also should know that you have tested it and you know it works as a solution. It's been a launched game which is on day one at 100,000. So when we are talking about Metaverse, we understand that the solution works. It's been battle tested. So yes, these are on the ground. Specific references, I would love to have an individual chat, understand what you're working on, and we can take it ahead from there.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So my question is, on what fundamental pillars would you say that the foundation of tokenomics should be based upon? And the context to which I ask this question is, if we take Axie Infinity, for example, they have unlimited supply for SLP. So, one suggestion could be how they can back SLP, limit that supply on the primary governance token, which is Axis, right? So, with this context, my question is, on what foundations should we, fundamentally decide the basis of tokenomics for a GameFi, if I take that into consideration?
Well, I think you have an answer in your question as well. And I'll tell you this way, and I know you've kind of given considerable thoughts to this. The pillars of tokenomics is not something which I can actually get into in terms of a 5 minutes discussion. If you have and I'm sorry I'm taking this question slightly away because I would rather take it in two parts. One, the game which you design, even before you reach the tokenomics part of it. The game has to have the playability factors. It has to be something where the economy or play to earn aspect is not a burden to the player. Once the the gaming aspect is clear, the tokenomics, because what is happening is we are trying to look at, and this is my personal view, my opinionated view again, it's not a generalist one. I'm not an economist specialist to talk about combining those two, but my experience with working with games is to look at this more in terms of making sure, and again my experience, not an AWS kind of an answer, is when we're working with customer, look at more on the gameplay and ensuring that the play to earn model is actually enriching it. Once you reach that point, then you follow up with a question that what do you want to take out and make sure it is available in a decentralized manner. And what we mean by that is essentially it has a life beyond the game. Once you establish that, then the currency becomes a very easy answer and the tokenomics need not be figured out because it will automatically work. So it's not like most of the games where there's an in-game currency which is there. It works because the gameplay works. So I would say focusing on the gameplay, and this is purely my experience with building and working with games. Focusing on the gameplay would be a more focused approach rather than taking the economics first and working through. Of course, tokenomics is not something which does not exist, but it's my personal opinion and my personal experience on that. I thought you had a question.
Hi, Abey.
So I'll take that one off. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, my bad. The gentleman friend had raised a hand and I couldn't. My bad.
Okay. So should I now?
Yeah, please.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Abey. Thank you. Would you like to know that do you have any use case in retail domain using Metaverse, or have you solved any use case? I know that you are completely from gaming and
No, it's not that just that. It's just that we work with different customers, and let's be honest about this. That Metaverse is something which kind of got coined as a word. Well, not coined as a word, rather solidified as a word. Because coined it was done very early, but solidified as a concept and a word in the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, two parts to this. Are we working with Metaverse customers? Yes.
Okay.
Retail. Maybe not me personally, but I can't speak for the entire audience. So if you have a specific use case which you have in mind, again, we'll love to hear it, and I can get you connected to the right specialist internally who works on the retail side of things.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Abey.
So I can tell you definitely for the Metaverse side of things, yes, we're working with Metaverse customers, and I'm more towards the gaming side of it. So of course,
Okay.
my
Yeah,
answers,
I understand.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir, can I ask a question, sir?
No problem. So sorry. Yes. If you don't mind, because
Yeah.
you kind of.
Generic. So, do you think that blockchain can play a role in supply chain management? And if yes, then how?
It does. It has in different forms. I can separately share you a case study which has been, which is more on a permission side, where for supply chain needs it has been already been used. It's not in India, but it's a publicly available reference, which I can share you the link for it.
That would be great. Thank you.
Definitely.
So can I ask my question?
Yes, please.
So actually, you told that Metaverse is a future internet. So where can we use it? You can use it in any source, like our mobile phones or laptop, or do we need any new material to use it?
Yes. So I didn't get into the very nitty-gritties of this slide, and I kept it open for everyone to read through. But each one of them is being interpreted and implemented both at the same time right now. So does that mean you need to combine all of it right away? Maybe not. You might combine 1 or 2 or 3 blocks. Does that mean there are answers for each one of them? Again, you can come up with one answer for that individual block, or you can just combine what is there existing. So to kind of get to the specific, if you're building something on Metaverse, look at these blocks and those layers as a driving factor to get a more comprehensive experience. But again, it's not that this is just a draft of the version 1. Everyone is experimenting, everyone is finding it out, and everyone is looking at it in terms of what can I learn from this experiment. Experiment means you will learn something back, and it's that phase. So.
Okay, sir.
Thank you so much, Abey. If you would like to just stay for a sec for a token of appreciation from Ty.
Thank you.